Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join Jack Stafford and Deborah Littleboy, members of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note, this is an independent program not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, our guest is Jeffrey Long. How are you doing, Jeffrey?
I'm doing very well. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me today.
It's great to have a heavyweight such as yourself on. Normally, I just have to talk to Deborah, and so it's great to have someone intellectual like yourself.
I'm sure Deborah's intellectual.
Well, I'm sure I'm not, Jeffrey, but I am interested in the truth. So,
Very good. Well, that's the most important thing.
And today we want to answer the question, what is God and what are we really here to do? So if you could answer that for us, we'd really appreciate it.
Nothing small, right? Just God, where we can. Okay.
No, but you're such a heavyweight. I mean, you have a great Hindu background, and we've been watching all your videos, and I've already shared them with friends, and yeah, it's wonderful work you're doing.
Very kind of you. I'm grateful to hear you say it's good to know someone's listening. And so I certainly appreciate it. And I love this quest, this exploration. To me, this is what life is about. This is why we're here. And it has enriched my life enormously to have been on this path because as some of you might know, I had some tragedies early in life. My father was in a very bad accident, eventually lost his life. And this really kind of set me off on the journey. I think I was already interested in it. I already had some inclination toward spiritual life, but that accelerated it. And, why are we here? And why are we here so briefly, it seems, and at least to all appearances? And why do we suffer the things that we do? And to undertake the spiritual journey and really start to get an understanding of the broader context of our lives, I think is profoundly reassuring, and really it helps you just keep going from day to day, right? And I love what you said at the start of it, how science, mystical experience, religion, philosophy, I mean, these are all facets of truth, right? And so what we want to do is explore those, integrate them as much as we can, and keep learning more.
Mm. Yeah, and I really love how you've come through different teachings. You go through the ancient Vedic texts, and then you come through, now in the Theosophical Society, and these, and that really is the lineage of the Aetherius Society is based on. This podcast is primarily for members and sympathizers of the Aetherius Society. So it's great to hear, to hear what you can bring from your many years of study.
Well, thank you.
Let me bring in Deborah here, because she's been in contact with you, and she has some great questions to kick us off.
okay. Well, yes, so many questions. What would you say if somebody sat before you and said, "Look, I don't really understand. I know there's something wrong. I don't get it. There's a lot of suffering. What can I do from today, from this moment, Jeffrey, from this next breath? What can I start to do to start to understand and make my life more pleasant?"
Okay, very good. So the question is a wonderful question. It's an urgent question. How do I make my life better now in light of everything? And I would recommend the practice of meditation, right? To sit in a place where you won't be disturbed for some period of time, to sit with a straight back so that it's possible to breathe deeply and have a constant free flow of oxygen into the body, the carbon dioxide out of the body, to close the eyes, to shut out external distractions, and to begin focusing on the breath, to become present to the breath. We're breathing all the time, but we're normally not conscious of it. It's something that happens automatically. As I tell my students, think of how stressful it would be if on top of everything else you had to remember to breathe, right? That would be one more thing you would have to do. Our body takes care of that for us, but for a period of time, become conscious of the breath. Take charge of that process, right? There's something called mindful breathing, where you take a deep breath, you take in as much air as you can into the lungs, and before releasing that breath, at the moment when you feel like exhaling, to pause briefly, not for a great length of time, not holding the breath, but just maybe a second, to be aware that I am now exhaling, and you exhale and you have that experience. And at that point, when you start to feel the need to inhale again, you again pause and say, now I'm going to inhale. So it becomes a deliberate, conscious act. Now, the person might say, what does this have to do with all of my troubles in life? Well, the more you do this practice, this focus on the breath and being present to those sensations as you breathe in and breathe out, you find your mind becoming very calm, very serene. In the classic text on meditation, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it says in Sanskrit, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which in English means yoga, and in this case, he means meditation, is the calming of the waves of the mind. So the waves represent our thoughts, our conscious experiences, our emotions. And if you imagine a body of water like a lake, if there are a lot of waves on the surface, if there's a lot of turbulence, you really cannot see anything else. You can't see beneath those waves. But when the waves become calm, when a body of water is very still, you notice two things. One, you can see your reflection in that water. It becomes like a mirror, right? You can see it. There may be a mountain in the distance, and you see another mountain reflected in the water. In the same way, our mind, when it's calm, accurately reflects the world around us. When the mind is turbulent, we see frightening things everywhere. Things become exaggerated. We get a funhouse mirror version of reality. And we see people living in that. If you watch the news, or even we ourselves do it sometimes, we get caught up in that, and it can become a source of great anxiety. The mind is calm. We see things as they are. They remain in proportion. Also, if you look into the water that's calm, you can see beneath the surface. You can see the fish swimming. You can see the pebbles at the bottom. Similarly, our true self, which is divine, is always there. That higher consciousness is always present within us. And if we calm our conscious thoughts, if we calm those waves of the mind, that deeper self shines through. It's very joyful, it's very blissful, and it's serenely aware of everything. And if you do this for even a few minutes a day, I have a good friend who's a Buddhist monk. He says even 5 minutes a day, right? Even as little as that will start to affect how you feel all of the time. And in my own tradition, we do this twice a day. We meditate morning and evening it can be a few minutes or it can be longer depending on what you want to do. But you need to do it regularly. And with that regular practice, sending your mind to that peaceful place becomes very easy. And it's almost as if time slows down. Things happen to us, and at one time we would have reacted very rapidly and without thinking to those things, often with negativity. Now we have this almost a time lapse experience where maybe the same old thing happens that normally would upset us, and we say, okay, I can choose to become angry, or I can choose to laugh, or I can choose not to respond at all. I have the ability to control the waves of the mind and direct them as I wish. And I don't have to let this upset me. I can maybe think about it in a more constructive or creative way. And I can realize that nothing that happens out here can harm the real self that is there within us. So this is the advice I would want to give to someone who is suffering. If they want to know, if they don't ask me, I'll just listen and let them share and unburden themselves. But if they want to know, I'd say this practice is something very easy to do. And it doesn't require a belief system. I talked about the self being divine. If that bothers someone, they can just set that aside. Say, well, you're going to experience something, and you're going to feel this calm and this serenity, and just try it. Right? Just try it. And the important thing is the regularity of the practice. It may feel good in the moment to meditate, but if it's not sustained, then your mind is soon back on its old track. But if you do this regularly, you're in effect reprogramming the mind to react to its experiences in a different way.
Deborah's frozen there.
I think so.
Maybe she's just taking it, acting out what you just told her to do.
Now I see. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I disconnected there. I'm awfully sorry, which is why I probably wasn't.
We thought you were meditating.
We thought you entered into
No.
you had achieved samadhi and you were in that.
That would be a real coup if she got into samadhi. And
you would have seen me levitating at that stage.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a way off. I fear. If so, I don't know whether Jack said this when I was off somewhere else. That really mirrors what we're told by an entity that we know as the Master Aetherius. And he said that you do your practices regularly, consistently, with good cheer. And now I'm okay with the regularly, but the good cheer sometimes is a little bit.
You can be very grumpy.
Yeah.
But I do remember that because we're fortunate, as you know, to actually hear the vibration of the Master Aetherius. I get reminded of exactly how he sounded as he came through Dr. King, and that it makes me smile. It's almost like Deborah with good cheer.
Yes.
But it's amazing how just the vibrations of an instruction changes the whole my whole outlook, really. Which
And when you have those experiences, it confirms this path, right? It becomes a matter not simply of belief, but of knowledge, right? Because you can't deny you've had the experience. It's part of your reality then. I'm reminded of that very famous dialogue with Carl Jung, where he was once asked, "Do you believe in God?" And he started by saying no. And the interviewer thought, well, okay, he's an atheist. But then he completed the sentence. He says, "I don't believe, I know." And that shocked the interviewers, not what they were expecting to hear, because when you've had some of these experiences, it becomes a self-certifying kind of reality, right? I don't question that I am talking to both of you right now. That's my reality. Now, I've been anticipating this, so maybe I'm dreaming about the conversation I will be having with you in a few hours, but in terms of my practical reality, that this is real, right, at the moment. And when we have these experiences of these higher entities communing and communicating, it really confirms us. And in this practice, I remember, and of course, being in the academic world, we always, it's our nature to ask skeptical questions. And I've thought before, what if this is just some other part of myself that's speaking with me? Maybe it's, not some divine higher reality. And the response I got back was, well, what's the difference? Right? If what you're receiving is positive and it's good and it's solidifying you in this practice that makes your life joyful, that makes you helpful to others, then where's the harm?
I see that as sort of almost like lining up the holes that you're going to put the screw through. The more that you can become in line with the truth of who you are, further up you can see.
Yes. Very nice image. I love that.
So that's when, yeah, that's right. It's you become. It's like the want and the need for me. We're taught that you might not get what you want, but you will always get what you need. Well, if I want what I need, everything I get is joyous.
Exactly.
So that's for me the lineup. But I have to remind myself of that, Jeffery. So if I went and fell over and broke my leg in a moment, I'd have trouble reconciling that was what I wanted.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually had that experience in 2019. I fell and broke my ankle, and at the time, I can't say it was pleasant, but I believe that because I've been practicing meditation for many years and I've been in this path for many years, it was a much easier experience than it would otherwise have been. And I was able to realize I'm not the body. I'm not my ankle. I actually apologized to my ankle. I'm so sorry that I've caused you this pain. And a doctor in the emergency room said, he said, I've never seen anyone who is so obviously in pain who's so cheerful. So what's your secret? And without even thinking, my mouth opened and I said that pain is in the body, suffering is in the mind. And the doctors and the nurses, they said, oh, that's very cool. And then they said, what do you do for a living? So then I told them, I teach about these things and so on. But it really helped me in recovery from that. And, and you think about the people who are suffering much, much worse things. Sometimes the inner wounds are much worse than the physical ones, right? And so for me, it's like, well, this is a small thing. This will pass. I'll go through physical therapy. It will heal. And it has, and I can now run and, do whatever I want. But these experiences remind us of these teachings. And I'm now grateful that I had that experience and I'm able to share with others, how it went for me because of this practice. Because if everything's going well and you say, well, this is because of my spiritual practice, someone might say, well, that's easy for you to say, let there be some difficulty in life and see how cheerful you are. Right. And that going through that experience with that injury was for me a kind of confirmation that I'm on the right path. Right.
Mm. Good
Yeah,
test.
I remember on a similar vein to that, Dr. King was sat listening to a clairvoyant, and the lady was saying, well, you have to get the higher states, you have to give up your clairvoyance because that's the lowest state. God, and so you raise it up. And Dr. King raised his hand and he said, but you've got to have that state of clairvoyance before ever you can give it up, my dear. And
Yes.
so she said, well, what, why are you saying that? He says, because I have had that experience. You have to have it to give it away. You can't just say it. You can't.
Well, she asked him how he
leg
knew. She asked him how he knew, and he said, well, I used my clairvoyant powers to tell you you'd never had clairvoyant powers.
Was very much his sense of humor. But one of the many reasons I love the master.
She didn't know what to say, I don't think.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out something I observed that was very beautiful. Like when I became aware of the Aetherius Society and looking at the materials online and so on, that the spiritual practice that he taught, it's called King Yoga, I believe. And that echoes in the Vedanta tradition, Raja Yoga, which means exactly the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's a kind of very interesting resonance there, but it was a different language, but still the idea that this is a royal path in a certain sense. And the fact that his name was King, it's this wonderful synchronicity of these things.
Well, Dr. King was a master of yoga in, I think, 8 yogas. I'm trying to look it up so I don't misquote. But his preference was Raja Yoga. That was his preference.
Yeah.
But he was told by the cosmic masters, no. In this age, it's karma yoga, selfless service to others. Because the time is running out, the earth has had her initiation, the vibrations are rising, and we're all in this together.
Yes.
And we don't want to be our brother's keeper. No, we might not like that, but actually, I don't care. It doesn't really matter that you like it. Well, you've got to rise above that pettiness of likes and dislikes. But the yoga of the day.
I've got a good quote, Deborah. Maybe I could read that.
Yeah,
I found. He says about Raja Yoga, Dr. King says, I like the tremendous mental stresses that you have to put upon certain psychic centers in certain deeper forms of Raja Yoga. I like the fact that if you make a mistake, you will land up a raving idiot. I like these things. There's danger. Here is a greatness. In these days, this karma yoga of service to others, union with God through service to others is the yoga. All else is second place. Even the great Raja is second place. Nani is second place. So yeah,
This is what Swami Vivekananda taught as well. I mean, he was very much in tune with this same message that he makes reference to the ancient Indian belief that there were earlier times in history when other yogas were predominant, and people in those eras were capable of some of those higher practices. And he said, today it is karma yoga. And you can really see that because the suffering is so great in the world. The need is so great that if we serve selflessly, we're addressing that need as best we can.
yeah. There's a great quote from Mars Sector 6 about come people who go into the caves to meditate, come ye forth, for ye are fools. It's like,
yes.
Yeah, but very from the hip teachings because of the Aetherius Society, you can be left in at the basic level. You can be left in no doubt unless you really choose to be, choose not to listen to it. So yeah,
that's right.
It was interesting. You mentioned Vivekananda. I was watching some of your lectures and I saw you were very interested in him. I actually did a little search through Dr. King's lectures to find where he mentioned him, because he was Dr. King also really admired Vivekananda. He one of the quite a few of the quotes were about that said Vivekananda was one of the greatest hypnotists of the modern times. One time, an English doctor, he was an English doctor, and a man was walking across a bridge, and he hypnotized the man from a distance. When he reached the middle of the bridge, and he says you see the real power of hypnosis, and Vivekananda would never hypnotize anyone once he'd mastered it. He said that you shouldn't use it; it's too powerful.
Yes, yeah. In the wrong hands, and this is why it's so interesting. Like in the Yoga Sutra, for example, that and students will sometimes say, "Why are they talking about that?" But the first stages are about moral perfections, nonviolence, truth telling, and so on. It's like, why does that matter? Well, if you haven't internalized those, then when these siddhis, when these powers come, you might do the wrong thing, right? And there are all kinds of stories in both the Hindu and Buddhist traditions of people getting very bad karma from abusing those powers. And they're temptations really to be, master them and then move on to the next level.
That's exactly what we've heard. Yes, yeah, exactly that.
Sorry.
He also mentioned, I've got a few quotes here. I'll nip through them quite quickly then. He talks about the fifth freedom from the nine freedoms, cosmic consciousness. And he says, very few people have experienced this. Yogananda wrote a book in the autobiography of Yogi. He wrote about his experiences. And he says the great Swami Vivekananda experienced cosmic consciousness in which he became one with all things. And he couldn't even walk across the grass because he'd been at one with the grass.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard that story as well.
Yes, absolutely.
It makes you hard to be even a vegetarian, though, if you can.
That's right. Because when we are sustaining these bodies, we're taking energy from somewhere, and that energy someone else has been using, right? So that's right. And I know in the Jain tradition, which I've also studied, and this is one of the reasons that people aim for spiritual liberation, is to reach a state where we're no longer sort of predatory upon our environment, where we really are truly free and self-sustaining.
And the last thing I thought about was because we believe that that these cosmic avatars come to Earth and they give us the great teachings. So Jesus, Sri Krishna, the Buddha, they're all supermen to us. They've come from other planets to incarnate through us, to take on karma, which is something you talk a lot about. And Swami Vivekananda, we believe, was one of these as well. And he said that the same phenomena is seen. A light was seen to go through the heavens and hovered over a certain house. And this has happened with the stars in the sky above, the Star of Bethlehem, many other, the Buddha had, I think, 5 stars. So, when Vivekananda chose to leave his physical body, he knew exactly to the second when he was going to leave. So yeah, I thought you'd be interested in a few quotes about that.
That's wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love seeing the sort of alignment and harmony and connection of these teachers and their teachings.
Yes. You have something to add, Deborah? I'm sure you.
Well, I did, but like I've got a goldfish memory. It's completely. I had a whole raft of things that I was like itching to talk about, and they've just completely just disappeared.
Oh, they'll come back. They'll come back.
At the bottom of my feet, I think they all went, Jeffrey. I don't quite know why. But anyway, yeah. So no, Jack, back to you.
Oh well. Well,
More
just
questions.
so when you heard about this society, isn't it funny that a man of your education, I'm always surprised when people haven't heard about this society, because it does fit on top of the ancient teachings, on top of theosophy.
Yes.
Um,
No, I've been very impressed with what I've learned, and it was striking to me that I had not come across the Aetherius Society before, because I've studied various traditions and groups, organizations that have these kind of interests, and studied many, participated in some, and so this one really intrigued me. And I would say one thing that I found especially interesting, and one is, of course, this wonderful harmony of the teachings, and to me that shows the validity of it, right? Because it's articulating these truths, and once you start looking at the way it's presented, one thing I think is very interesting is the idea of the masters being from specific planets even of our solar system. Because if you look at it from a sort of materialistic perspective, from perspective of contemporary science, doesn't look like there's much in the way of life in the solar system, right, beyond Earth. Maybe something once on Mars, maybe something under the oceans of Europa or Iapetus or Titan, out in further space. But the idea that these teachers are operating on a different vibrational frequency, different plane from the physical. And I was reading that, I was like, well, that makes perfect sense, because they wouldn't then be detectable by sensory means, right? By conventional means. They'd be operating on a different level, because you also have the idea in the Indian traditions as well that we are also simultaneously, while we are in these manifesting as these physical forms, we also have other bodies that are that we experience in dream states and various meditative states and so on, the subtle bodies, as they're called in the Indian traditions. And they also aren't, detectable necessarily to the senses. And so that made perfect sense to me. It's okay, this would, if we were talking about life in a kind of material sense, you might read that and say, well, there's no life on Venus. How could there be a master from Venus? But if you're talking about another plane, then, well, of course there can't be, right? Because we're talking about something that we don't have a telescope for, right? At least yet, maybe someday, but it's not something that is evident to the senses. But it's one of these experiences, it sounds like, that Dr. King had, that he had these communications. And my sense is always that, if what the masters are telling you in one area is true, and, we can test it in our own lives, then it would make sense that the other aspects would also be as well, right? They wouldn't.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say, okay, we're going to give some genuine spiritual teaching, and then we're going to make up a story about being from Venus. Right? That doesn't compute, right? So this idea makes, I think, a lot of sense. That when we're talking about entities of these kinds, we're not talking about the physical world necessarily.
That really resonates, because people say, how do you know? You don't know. Well, you know, but I'm taking the advice of people who've given me directions to other places, and I arrived there, and they've given me directions to this, and they've described the other place. I've never been to China, but I've heard enough people describe it, and so when you hear someone who's really telling you wise truths that resonate, and then they tell you further things, then it's a matter of logic and discernment to believe them.
Precise. No, I find it fascinating, and the direction my thought has been taking in recent years has been toward thinking of the planets themselves as living beings, and stars. Many astronomers talk about the lives of stars, and maybe they're speaking metaphorically, but they go through definite stages, and they
as above, as below. Yeah,
exactly. And so we are like that. So, why could we not see that as life? This is certainly
Mahabindus. No, they've
yeah,
got
exactly. Yeah.
And it's all in the teachings as well, isn't it? I mean, I'm from the bright and morning star, and it's all in the ancient Vedic texts as well, the Bhagavad Gita, and it's just
Absolutely.
encoded language.
That's right. And if you read it through the lens of these ideas that you find in the Aetherius Society, it's again very logical, right? The stories then flow very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I've brought there is from our practices, which is the 12 blessings. And the 8th blessing is to the mighty sun. And we're told here that at the end of the blessing, Master Jesus says, if you, my children, would change from men to God men, that in itself is very telling, isn't it?
Aquarian age teaching too.
You would send your love, and we know that love is an energy, not some wishy-washy emotion. Send your love always towards this great being. So it's a being. It's not just something else. It's a being,
right?
For which you now take for granted and don't reject. Yeah. But then, for this is the God of your Bible. This is the Brahma of the Hindu scripts. When I read that, Jeffrey, in fact, it's done it to me again now. It was like, what? Really?
It spoke the word, yeah.
I had to trick it, and I thought, well, really, why? Of course it is.
Yes.
Of course it is. We know that we get all of our energy, love, from the sun. And it's supposed on this is the nearest thing to God in your concept of manifestation. And you hit, and I felt like I'm going, yeah, you're right, Jesus. He's onto something there. Mark well, O children, these words, for you will see them written again in the book of records. So the Akashic records are real. So I'm like, oh yes, that's Jesus says that's real. Do I believe this was Jesus speaking through Dr. King? Yes, I do. Why? Because I felt the vibrations of it. I've practiced it. It feels good. So on that same foundation. But wait ye not until then, for present action must be your guide. A direction. Do this work. This is not a theory. This is something I've given you. It's easy. Even you can do this, Deborah. Just get on with it. And the more you practice it, the better you'll be. And then Master Aetherius comes in, but with good cheer.
Yes.
No, for being grumpy. No. Don't want to be sending grumpy energy out there.
That's right. There's plenty of that already, right? Yes. Well, in our email correspondence, you had compared the 12 blessings to the Bhagavad Gita, which I think is a very good comparison, because you have as a very high metaphysics, but always oriented toward action. Right? So what? Now what do we do? And this is a theme that I see that's shared across both of those. And it's always interesting that the Gita is taught by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, who's a warrior. He's a person of action, right? He's not a contemplative in a cave, right? And he wants to know what he should do, right? And so that's us in this particular era of history too, right? We're very practically oriented, and necessarily so. I mean, that's what we're mastering, I think, at this stage in our journey. So the 12 blessings fits right with that. And the idea of the sun, as you were mentioning, as manifestation of that infinite divine energy. One of the oldest Hindu prayers, the Gayatri Mantra, is a prayer to God as the sun, right? And the prayer, it says, Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, which roughly means we salute, we honor the beautiful light of the rising sun. May it illumine our minds and it inspire our thoughts. And traditionally, the Brahmins in India have observant ones have prayed that prayer every day at sunrise. And it's a very, very ancient part of the Hindu tradition. That verse I chant is from the Rig Veda, so it's very, very old. And it resonates with this message in the 12 blessings as well.
it's like a decree, isn't it? So it's like a spell almost, if you're going to put it into Deborah language, that you know it's going to work. Why do you know it's going to work? Because you can feel the energy and you've read enough and you've tested enough to believe it, which is going back to what Jack says. So when you stand there and you do the blessings, you're invoking that energy. You know that as you ask, so it will be given to you. And so therefore you know, it's not, oh, wouldn't that be nice? The more that you can focus and you know it, the stronger the focus is. And I think that is incredible for the average person to understand that they're not powerless. No, but they're only powerless because they don't use power.
Right.
Well,
we have this sort of veil of ignorance over us that we haven't yet completely penetrated, and these teachings from all the masters, right, from the various traditions, they're all sort of telling us, open your eyes, open your eyes, open your eyes. And it reminds me of a story. I have a very good friend from Hawaii, and when I visited him once, he took me on a little tour of Oahu, and there was this sort of little cove, and there are people who surf there. It's sort of popular, but there are very high waves there, and it creates the impression that the water is deeper than it really is. And he told me a story of how there was a man once who started to drown, and he was caught in these waves, and he was calling out, "Help, help!" And there was a lifeguard nearby who took a megaphone and said, "Stand up!" And the man just put his legs down, and the water was only about chest. In fact, he just had to put his feet down, stand up, and he was safe. And now I'm not drowning anymore. I think we're like that man, right? We feel like we're drowning in all of this, this Maya, this, this delusional thought that we have. And if we just stand up, right? If we put our feet firmly on the ground of spiritual practice and spiritual teaching, then the problem just goes away very often.
I heard you talking in a lecture, I think. Sorry, I'm always interrupting you.
Oh, no,
Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, well, I just very briefly mention a very powerful experience I had. There was a person I had some conflict with, and I was troubled by it. And one of the sacred figures to whom we turn in my traditions, we call the Holy Mother. She was the wife of Sri Ramakrishna, who was the teacher of Swami Vivekananda. And I got a very clear message saying, make peace. And I was a little resistant to that. It was like you were saying, Deborah, about the cheerful thing. It was like, well, this person's done this, and they've done this, and they've done this, and what about that? And then I got the message back again, a little more insistently, make peace. So I said, okay, this is what I have to do. So I was supposed to meet that person, and I did. And what I did, rather than feel very guarded and defensive as I tended to with this person because of other things that had been said and done in the past, I just went cheerfully. I went, I said, I'm going to treat this person like I do everyone else. And we had a very pleasant conversation. And from that point on, our conflict was gone. It was as if it had evaporated. And we didn't resolve it, right? We didn't try to talk through issues. We didn't say, well, you said this, and well, you said this. We just kind of let it go. And it was beautiful. It's resolved itself. It was, that's to me, a very powerful thing. That for me, that's tangible proof that what I received was true and it was from a reliable source.
I actually heard a lecture from Dr. King this morning, ties in with what you're saying about, well, we said all the teachings fit together, because you've also talked about the elephant, and how we feel the different parts of the elephant to get the whole truth. And yeah, but also that the masters are really saying one thing very simply, but they have to say it hundreds of different times in thousands of different ways. And you talk about moksha, and I've heard it said that the teachings that ignorance is the only crime. If you're doing everything, it doesn't matter if you don't know you're breaking a law. You can't tell that to a policeman. And it's the same with the law of karma. If you break the law, you must be taught a lesson. You must learn. And so that's how and I was thinking, I can't remember if you said this, but in one of your lectures, but ignorance is caused by our involution, or our involution caused our ignorance. Like,
right.
Truth has two poles. I don't know if that's
Yeah, this is from something I'm actually still working on. I gave a talk on this not long ago. It was on why the yogas work, right? What is it? What is the function of the yogas? And the question takes you to the very nature of creation, which, as I understand it, and this is shaped by the teaching of Swami Vivekananda and the Advaita Vedanta tradition, that creation itself involves introducing differentiation where there is originally oneness. So there's originally oneness. The infinite is infinite being, infinite consciousness, infinite bliss, Satchidananda, as we say in the tradition. And in order for there to be a world, there has to be variety, right? There people and plants and animals, molecules, and all of these things. So the process involves a kind of voluntary differentiation of the one into the many. But a byproduct of that is that we, those little parts that have been differentiated, have a forgetfulness of our original oneness and our true nature. It's not a complete forgetfulness, because if it were, we could never return back to the source, and we do. Right? We know beings who have. So we've I like to say the veil of Maya is translucent. It's not opaque, right? But there is that veil, and so we see ourselves as separate beings with separate interests. That makes conflict possible. That makes violence possible. That makes suffering come about. And the thing is that's so beautiful is that this is really just a phase in the larger scheme of things, that the behind this differentiation is also a pull to return back to the oneness, but to return with a deeper appreciation, right, of the fullness of what that infinite reality is. And I use a metaphor sometimes to describe this. I find this works very well with my students, many of whom have pets. I say, you have a little dog whom you love very much, and you love spending time with your little dog, but then your little dog gets lost. And for a few days, you're frantic because where's my little dog? And you put up signs and you put up notices everywhere. Please return my dog. And then a few days later, someone calls. They say, I have your little dog. And they bring the dog back home. And there's this beautiful, happy reunion. And I say to the students, what's more joyful, just sort of having your little dog there with you, or that moment of, and I think of the Bible, my son was lost, now he is found, right? That joyful reunion. And so the brilliance of the cosmic mind is that it creates that for itself by differentiating and separating into all of us. That creates the possibility of this beautiful return when we come back and are reunited with, as my own teacher would say, that which we've never really been separated from. But we have, for us, that was a real separation, right? We felt it as a real separation. We return, and it's that infinite bliss, that infinite joy can really be felt. So it's almost, it seems, built into our involution into this material world that we are going to have those experiences. But ultimately, the aim of it is that return back to the infinite. As the Hare Krishna say, back to Godhead, right? This is where we're all headed.
Yeah, that's in all the teachings. And one of our guests said, nice quotes, look, suffering is separation. Once you've experienced an NDE or a higher state of consciousness, to be away from that, to be out of the bliss, then you can begin to experience suffering. And they talk about sacrifice, and in the 12 blessings, they talk about how the great beings suffer. And I'm saying, I'm little lower self me is saying, like, how can they suffer? They're great beings. They're great. But maybe the more you know the more higher you've experienced, the greater the suffering to be separated from it. And we don't have that. I have no experience of the divine, so I don't suffer. Ignorance is bliss. Or is it suffering? Or is it the crime? I don't know. But what I also wanted to say was, let me just finish what I originally wanted to say was about how there was originally, I heard there was one yoga. There is no point in one yoga. There's one of everything. There's one energy, there's one truth, there's one God. There must be one yoga. And it's split up over time. Patanjali came down and, broke up a bit of it and gave us that. So there's Jnana yoga, Raja yoga, and Karma yoga, all the yogas. And that's like we exist in a sea of mind, but consciousness is mind slowed down. So, each of the chakras slows down consciousness, slows down mind so that we can experience a level of consciousness. And, what we're at that level we vibrate at. So as we get more, we can get more of and unify the teachings and raise our consciousness.
Right. And we perceive more of it directly ourselves. It becomes knowledge. Goes from being theory or an article of faith
being a knower
to knowledge.
Yeah. I'm still.
And we can share our stories as we go back on other experiences, saving all your bus tickets and your photographs, and then just, will I experience this? And it's going to be marvelous. It's going to be marvelous. Yeah.
Wonderful reunion. Yes.
Well, talking of separation, it's probably time we wind this up. So it's flown by the time.
It has. I have to agree. I feel like we're just getting started. But
you'll just have to come back on.
Well, let me know, and I'll be very happy to. And I really have enjoyed our conversation. This physical body is in my office on campus right now. So this is here at Elizabethtown College, Pennsylvania. And sometimes I might be speaking to you from another room with even more books behind me. That's my office at home, which is very nearby. It's just been my pleasure to have the two of you here in my office today.
Been wonderful. And how can people follow you and find out more and get more of what you've been talking about?
Well, I really should develop a website because I'm now accumulating enough material that I should. If people are more inclined to read, I would say there's a website called academia.edu. They can look me up there, Jeffery D. Long. It's Jeffery, kind of an odd spelling, but I'm named after my father, so I don't change it. Ery, Jeffery D. Long. Many of my publications and papers are there, and links to Google Books for my books. If people are more inclined to watch and listen, something like a podcast, something visual, if you just put my name into YouTube, a bunch of things from the Vedanta Society of New York appear there. I've given many presentations there. I'll be giving another one on 8th of October. The Swami in charge of Swami Vivekananda. In fact, I recommend his videos. He has a very large following, just a brilliant presenter of Vedanta philosophy. But he has me guest lecture there sometimes. And I think a few other snippets of things I've done are there as well. So there's YouTube. Like I said, I should develop my own website that could be a central clearinghouse for all of this. That's on my to-do list. But for now, long list. But for now, the academia.edu is good for reading, and YouTube is good for watching and listening.
All right, wonderful. And if people want to learn more about the Aetherius Society, they can go to aetherius.org. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Very good. And I recommend everyone does. So
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you both. Bye-bye. Namaste.